Welcome to the Bridge the Gap podcast. Here's your host, Dustin Udke.
Welcome in everyone to an episode of the newly improved Bridge the Gap podcast. I'm excited to have you here tonight. We're going to be talking all things leadership versus management and the difference between the two and why both are necessary and some of the ways they can go right and some of the ways they go wrong. So I'm bringing in someone that I've had a lot of conversation with. I'm bringing in Brian Hartman, Too Much Brian on Twitter, so at @too_much_Brian, to talk about this. Now, Brian, you're a manager, is your day-to-day job, right? We both do fantasy football on the side, but this is more about management and leadership. So let's talk about some, just like give the listeners kind of your background in management and leadership.
Well, I feel like, unfortunately, I have been a part of leadership my entire life. As somebody who's just naturally been taller my entire life, I noticed quickly as a child in like elementary school, shit went wrong. Teachers pointed at me really quickly. You know, like, look, you're a leader here in the classroom. I'm like, why? I'm not in charge here. I'm like, but like, so there's certain things that just kind of point you that way, and I always stuck out at that point. So, I've always been in somewhat a role there, but yeah, the last 10 years I've been management position, and it's completely different things. You know, I like leading, I like managing, but I like different aspects of both of them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so those who don't know, Brian is what, like, you're like 6'5"?
Yeah.
I'm 6 foot and you tower over me. That's all I know. So you do stand out. I can totally get that in class. I was always the smarter kid in class. So like, they were like, you should know better. And I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't participate. Like, it wasn't me. I can't tell them not to do.
Right. I wanted to watch it happen. I knew it was wrong, but I wasn't doing it. Just let me see it unfold.
I wasn't participating, and I can't tell them what to do and what not to do. And I agree with you. There's differences between management and leadership. I've been in management now for almost over 20 years. I started when I was like 18 and been managing people and processes and buildings. And for me, you know, people ask me, what do you do? And I say, I'm a manager. And they go, what? I go, it doesn't matter. Right? Whether you're managing people, whether you're managing processes, whether you're managing buildings, there's the same tool set that's involved, right? And then there's leadership, which I've been in leadership for, different companies, different, jobs, different organizations, side things. And that's a completely other aspect. So let's talk about, in your mind, Brian, what is leadership? If you guys are watching, you have questions about leadership or management, drop them in the chat. We'd love, this is a 3-person conversation between me, Brian, and you guys. So drop in the chat. But Brian, what's your concept of what is leadership to you?
So I guess leadership is less about being in charge and more about being somebody people want to follow. I feel like it's so many intangibles that go into leaderships. Some of it is just vibes. Like you see people, and before you really know a whole lot about them, I feel like sometimes you get those vibes, those auras of people. Like, all right, they give off those leaderships. Whether it be the way they carry themselves, the way they go about things. It's a different tone. Something like values usually like play into that kind of thing, and then management is a bit different. You can manage with leadership, but you can manage also with just basic skills that you learn. I don't feel like always you can learn full-on leadership skills or everything that it encompasses.
Yeah, I agree. I think leadership is definitely more of something you're born with. You can learn to be a leader, but it's harder than management. For me, leadership is probably what you said, right? It is that, kind of being someone that people want to follow, but it really is the person who cast the overall vision and the direction in which things are going to go. And then compared to management is really the person who makes it go, right? So to me, if you're talking like a train, leadership is the tracks, right? You're the tracks going, hey, this is where we're going. And management is the engine and pushing or pulling the train forward. And those things tend to work in common. We talk a lot. We talk about vision and mission statements in business. And for those who don't know, like, the vision outlines basically the organization's like aspirations and where they want to go and why. And management is really, and so then that's really leadership. And then the mission statement, which is management, describes how they're currently doing the vision, right? So it's like what they're doing. So One is like why, and one is what. And I think that's really the best way I've looked at leadership and management, because I agree with you. I think there's people that are naturally just, you walk in a room and you're like, okay, that person's in charge. Like, you just know.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not in the right position, and that becomes a whole power dynamic we'll get into.
So
how do you define management?
Management is more as like they're asking, how do we get there efficiently? How do we get there on time? They're the ones that take the leadership, the mindset, the vision that you were talking about, and they make it happen. They're the one that they build the structure. They divvy out the tasks. They pass those things out. The processes, the efficiency. A lot of that is built in, and a lot of that is learned. There's different management styles too. That was something, like I said, I've done 10 years working in management, and initially I did a lot of what's called muscle managing. If I did not have the people around me that could make me successful, I would get it done myself. I would go around there, find those abilities. And what I learned was I did that at my detriment, because I was burning myself out by, instead of improving others around me and having them get that done, all in all I'm doing is hurting them and hurting me in the process. So yeah, there's definitely ways of learning about that, how to actually divvy out that thing. And then that's where the leadership comes in. How do you inspire them? How do you inspire them to want to be better, or to be greater, and to take those tasks that you're trying to manage to them and really blossom?
Yeah, I was the same way when I was younger. A lot of I'm going to manage my staff. I worked at a bagel place, and I'd have a staff of 5 or 6, high school kids. And I was, in college, and, it's like, hey, we need to get this done. If they can do it, I'd just jump in and do it for them. And that really wasn't management. That is a form of management where you're saying it's like muscle management, but it's also not like, you're not connecting them to a why. And that's I'm a big believer in connecting people to why. And that's a leadership quality, is like connect people to your why. And management really is, hey, we need to accomplish this task, and it's very short-term oriented, whereas leadership, I find, is very long-term oriented.
Yeah.
So leadership will say, hey, this is where we want to be in a year, and management say, hey, this is where we want to be in a month.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that time frame does vary, but in the types of management places you are, it might be, hey, this is where we want to be in 10 years versus a year. Or it might be, this is where we want to be in a month for leadership versus today for management. And then I think those are some different aspects, but it's the time frame that they're looking at are very different. And I think leadership on that will say, hey, we'll suffer through some growing pains because we're all on board the same vision. Yeah. Whereas management doesn't want to suffer those growing pains because they're very we can't suffer today. We need to fix it today. And like you said, at the detriment to your future growth. What does good leadership look like to you? The people you've had in leadership, or the leadership you've seen that you find to be the most effective, or just to be categorically good leadership, what does that look like?
A lot of it's morale. Lot of it's morale. I've worked with great management within the businesses that I've worked for, and if the morale wasn't there, that is one of the biggest pieces. First thing in the morning, you got to get them rolling. You got to get it initiated, because everybody's got something going on. There's always something to distract away, whether you're talking about managing in your work life, and like we do fantasy football for the side, stuff like that. There's so many things that encompass that. So it's all about how you approach it. And if you don't have that solid mindset, if you don't have that chemistry with people, it really comes at you, it hurts you. So, people also being able to take ownership of their work, not just taking it as, hey, look what I did, but hey, I dropped the ball. And those those situations, being able to say, hey, look, the team failed. That was on me, but this is how we're going to go about it. That's where the morale bounces back in. It's all about how you address it. So for the longest time, I lacked empathy in my management. I was all about, I don't care, get it done. Yes. And I thought that worked because I also worked in places with, high retention rates where you're moving through them so fast, it really didn't matter. But as I learned to grow with a little bit more empathy, have that velvet glove on the iron fist, if you will, that kind of approach, I kept people longer. I had more time and more exposure with them. And I was burning myself out less because, I'm keeping these people around a lot more.
Yeah, you brought up some good things. So empathy is a huge one. And so I'm from the East Coast. I live in the Midwest now. So there's Midwest nice. And I am what most people here consider to be East Coast rude. I'm very direct, very blunt with people. I don't have a lot of empathy because I'm like you, where it's like, hey, we've got things to do. And either you get on board, or the bus is leaving the station, get on board, or it's going to leave you. And if you don't get on board, I will find someone else who will. Right, and for the long term, because I think there's, we could talk all these cliches of give people enough rope, and enough rope till they hang themselves. And my thing is cool, that's great. If they hang themselves, they need to cut dead weight. And, I tell people at work that I interviewed for the job I currently have, and I basically told them, I said, listen, I'm a hammer. If you want a hammer, I'm here for you. If you're looking for a pillow, I'm not your guy. I am a hammer. That is who I am. That is how I operate. If you want someone who's going to have tact and is going to sugarcoat things, I'm not your guy. And now my boss is very nice and very, he's very much the pillow and will sugarcoat things. And I think he wanted a little bit someone who's got a little bit more of the directness. And there's things I got to temper down on that. And people don't always take that the right way. And part of me is like, well, whatever, that's on you. But there is that empathy piece. And for me, leadership, we talked about morale. That goes into like the sense of belonging and engagement from your employees or your staff or your crew. A good leader can get people to feel like they belong and get buy-in on things because they've connected to the vision, because they've created this atmosphere where they are leading by example. They're leading with a sense of like, hey, this is who we are and this is what we are. And you don't have to struggle to get people to do things. I think if you're a leader and you are struggling to get people to do things, I think that's because you haven't connected them to a why. And I think there's that lack of belonging and engagement, because I think poor leadership really does create the sense of like disengagement and the sense of like, not my job, not my title, right? Like not my job duty, that's someone else's job. And I think that's something that like leaders need to look for. And when we look at management, for me, good management is communication. It is this trust and verify process of, hey, I gave you a task. I'm believing that you're going to do it, but I'm also going to verify that you did. And I think we see bad management. We'll get into a little bit of like, they just trust people to do it. And they're just like, yeah, they did it. Obviously, like, no, there is some sense of like follow through and follow up and right. It's planning, but also like implementing that plan and then following through to make sure the plan actually got done. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk to Dean Curtis from company, and he's going to come and talk about mentoring and coaching. I think that's something that's huge for management leadership, is like that aspect of management, of coaching and mentoring people. Because I do think that's a part of both of these, that you need to be mentoring them to help them grow. And what I find is that leadership for me is looking at people as beyond what they can give for your company. And management is in the same boat, but management is like, hey, where can you go in the company? Like you may be role X right now, but where can I grow you in my company? Leadership's going, hey, where can you go as a person? And that's all through mentoring and coaching. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks with another guest. But that's how I look at it. It's like there's that aspect of like, how do you develop people? How do you handle people? How do you handle processes? And how do you work? That's good management. What's good management to you look like?
Good management makes good leadership sustainable, I guess, is like
that's really good.
I guess the biggest part of it, because as I've developed these skills and developed my role as a leader as a good manager, it's taking my leadership skills and honing it down and making it all happen. I can shoot out ideas left and right, but for the longest time, nothing moved. I got traction on nothing because I didn't have it organized. I didn't manage that expectation, those ideas and these things like that. So it's roles, it's responsibilities, making sure that those are clear. I don't think I can stress more on that. I guess leaning back onto your communication, being able to communicate those things, that's just so critical in how things work, is being able to have I'm big on like organization, functions, just how things work, being able to the easier you make it for people, the more likely they're set up for success. So like, I can't tell you how like organized of a person that I am. Like my garage is like labeled and my kitchen's date dotted. Like it's ridiculous how organized I like to keep things, to keep it from, because it'll spin out. If I don't have that structure, I will just completely spin out. So I think those are like the key components for me anyway.
Yeah, organization for me is huge. If you were to see around my desk, I say it's organized chaos. Like I know where everything is, and it may not look like it to anybody else, but like for me, it's organized. Like I know this is here. When I go to events for media, I take my little media bag, and everyone marvels because it's all like in there and labeled.
Dude, I've got like 10 of those.
It's all like in there nicely and laid out and everything. I was at the draft, and someone was like, "Oh, I need a battery," and I was like, "Here's a battery." He's like, "I don't have a cord." I was like, "Hold on." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you have everything." I was like, "Yes," and that's organized because like I'm on the move. But like my basement is, my wife hates the basement that I'm in because it's just stuff. But I know where everything is, and so like I agree, there has to be some sort of organization. Me and you have talked a lot about offline about spreadsheets, and we love having different spreadsheets to keep everything organized and tracked. And I think that's part of it. And I think people are listening. There are people that are good at leadership and not management. There are people that are good at management and not leadership. There are people that are good at both, but there are also people who aren't good at any.
100%.
And I think that's okay. And I think we need to start being okay with, hey, you're just not good at either. It's like there's some people who are just worker bees, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's valuable people. You need people who are going to come in every day, do their tasks, do their job, do it well, have a lot of ownership over it, but just aren't leaders in the broader leader sense. Like they're a leader in their work ethic, but they're not like leading people or leading processes, and they're not managing. They're doing their thing, but they can't inspire other people. And I think we have to get okay with that. Be okay with that.
Yeah, I think we get like several of those sayings for a reason. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians. If is that still okay to say? Actually, as that one came out, I was like, well, I don't know. But it's like that for a reason. I don't think anyone is more or less valuable. I've seen teams that are absolutely amazing, and then their leaders are crap. But like the team, the worker bees, as you may look as like lower tier. No, those are the ones that are superior. In my jobs, the base level worker, I've seen some of the best workers that are there, and they don't want to move up. They're happy with where they want. They don't want to be responsible for others, and I can respect that. If I didn't get smacked with a leadership title as much as I would just be watching out for me and just going me, because it's so much easier that way. I can get so much more done if I don't have to branch out like that, but then I'm also limiting myself. You can only go so far by yourself. And what I'm looking at in the fantasy football light, I need others. So I need to be able to open that up and make sure that I bring in a great team, whether that be with me or I'm along with them,
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of people. I worked in custodial, and we had really great custodians. And I was like, hey, would you want to be? And they're like, a lead worker? Like, nope. Like, do you want to be on a committee? They're like, nope, I just want to come in, do my job, do it well, and go home. Like, okay, like I have to respect that because they know their limitations. I think me and you, Brian, are both extroverts, and I think that is a quality that a lot of leaders have. You're not an extrovert?
I am a hardcore introvert, man.
You're definitely not.
I can't tell you how long it took me to get fantasy football content rolling because I hate being on camera. I absolutely hate. Yeah, I'm a hardcore introvert.
Every time I see you, you are very extroverted. So
it's because I'm drinking a lot of the times when we see each other.
All right, fair enough.
That is usually my key. But yeah, COVID, I was thriving for the first 2 years. When I go out and about, people have to keep a 6 foot distance? Okay, let's go.
I never got COVID because I was an essential worker, so I never got like the stay at home order. I had to go to work. So I kind of never had that COVID experience. So let's get back to leadership. When you have good leadership, what are some of the things you see happen or that are signs of good leadership in your opinion? Whether that's from the leader, whether that's from the worker, whether it's just a company in general, what are some of the signs of good leadership?
I mean, I guess it's kind of hitting back on some of those earlier ones. Like the morale is a big one. Just being able to, I'm going to use the word manage, but manage the emotion, the how that works. Of just, stuff goes wrong. You've got a plan in place. You're working hard, and all of a sudden you get a curveball thrown at you. Hey, how do we redirect? How do I get everybody back on place and get them, rocket and roll and getting them focused where they realize how they can be successful.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're talking about that, the morale, it's very even keel. Like there's not these spikes. And I think when you have bad leadership, you'll see those spikes right. Something goes wrong and everyone all of a sudden it's a catastrophe and everybody's down. Then something goes right and we're so great because everything's amazing and we did one thing right. I also find that when I look at a company and there's good leadership, what I see is they're always focused down the road. There's almost never a focus on like, this is what we're doing this week. Like, hey, we did this project and now it's out. It's like, no, we're past it. Like we already, like that project we already knew was going to come out. We're already on the next project down the road. We're already, 10 steps ahead. We're past that. And there's this very sense of like future driven, future focus where it's like, hey, this is where we're going. That's partially because I think the leadership has good managers in place to manage the data. But leadership to me, I think there's just a focus in the company as a whole. So I do think there's this top down process of, if this is what the company, if our ultimate leader, whether that's a CEO, whether that's, whoever that is at the top is going, hey, I'm looking forward, I'm 6 months ahead. then everybody else goes, hey, I need to start thinking, right? And everybody's going to go, well, if he's 6 months ahead, I need to be 4 months ahead. Then the person that is going, I need to be 3 months ahead. The person that's going, I need to be 2 weeks ahead, right? And it just kind of trickles down. So I see that. What are some signs of bad leadership that you've seen or can point out?
I mean, Michael Scott's a great example for you.
Yeah.
You know, like
From The Office.
Yeah, from The Office. You know, leads with his heart, forgets the spreadsheets. You know, like it's just you see it happening. I mean, I'm trying to think of football locations, but like you see teams constantly where just everything seems to go wrong, and it all stems from the top. You know,
Yep.
it trickles down between every layer. So you may have bad leaderships multiple places, but like you have to keep going up the ladder to find the source of that to kind of end where that goes. So I just think. I mean, I talked about a good leadership being able to take ownership in like failures and stuff like that. I think that's a big thing for me. If I can't see somebody that I'm supposed to look to for leadership, if they skate away from that, can't fully take ownership for those things, those are red flags for me.
Yep.
Because like where are you going to be when it's me on the line and you're supposed to be there to back me up? It's not going to happen because just the leadership's not there.
Yeah, for me, bad leadership is there's that kind of what you were saying. There's the I and them mentality. So I've always believed that a good leader will say when things go right, he goes, yes, they or them, they did a good job. It's always on the people. When things go bad, it's like, well, I did a bad job and I didn't do this right. They take all the bad on them and take none of the good, and they pass the good on to other people, whether it was them or not. Like they're always going to take that, and they're always going to take the brunt of the, hey, this was my fault. This didn't work out, and they'll work and they'll grow. Also, for me, I think bad leadership is that unwillingness to grow, unwillingness to have honest look inward, whether that's at themselves or the company and the processes, and realize like, hey, maybe we need to make some changes. And I think there's bad leadership is afraid to make changes, is afraid to upset the apple cart on some level. Like they just kind of go, well, this is what we want, and it's going and it's okay, and they don't want to make the hard choices, and that's just not good leadership. Like a leader should be able to say, hey, this is the right direction we need to go in. And I firmly believe that if you have done leadership well and you got people connected to the vision, they're going to understand that, and they're going to be able to take that with a grain of salt, whether it's a demotion, whether it's a shift on something they were really, they were working on a project and you decided to shift, a couple months in because it's not where you want to go and it's not clicking. Not being afraid to do that. And that's why I think is really where leadership excels for me, is that not being afraid to make changes.
Look at the Bengals. Marvin Lewis was there for 15 years. Yep. One of the longest tenured coaches we've had this century. It is unbelievable how long that man had the head coaching job there. And I mean, look at the Bengals. They continue to fumble just across the board, whether it be the contracts for Burrow and Jamar Chase recently, but just like, the unwillingness to adapt, to change, to try and make some sort of like conscious effort to improve everyone below them. Because think of everybody like below them, whether it be the players, the other staff in the building, like just they were at the detriment because of the head coach there, and then they wouldn't change that because of the leadership above.
Yeah. I always say that what walks in the father runs in the family. So whatever the head is going to slightly allow, the kids are going to run wild with. So that's the part of leadership. Is like you need to nip that in the bud, because you have to be willing to change. Because if you want other people to change, there has to be an inkling of it in you. Because whatever you do a little bit, they're going to do a lot. So what does good management look like, and what does bad management look like to you?
I guess see so. Part of me still falls back to my muscle management from time to time, just to like I get bored and I just want to do it all because
Yep.
So I kind of a loaded question there with some of that. So I think it can kind of determine like what you're talking about, whether you're managing, like you said, people, processing, products themselves, but bad management it reeks instantly. Just the way people treat each other. For the longest time, like I talked about empathy before, my wife's she's a mental health counselor, so she's been working on this project for quite some time, but I always thought that I was doing people a service by being honest and brutally honest, like very blunt with people, kind of like, you were talking about that, and I didn't see anything wrong with that. And she kind of told me that like honesty without tact is just cruelty. And as I've gotten older, you know, and into my 30s, and I kind of reflect back and like seeing others make those mistakes that I made, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like I can be brutally honest with somebody while also not trying to tear them down, because like I do like to push people over in the sense of like making them crumble to build them back up stronger, but I don't need to go in there with a bulldozer. You know, we can shave away a little bit at a time and build it back up, rather than just coming in there and absolutely wrecking people, because everybody is different as far as the way they look at things, the way they approach things. For the longest time, I thought, no, everybody must think the same way, you know, very cut and dry, very black and white. And no, that's not how the world works at all. That's the beauty of how things get done, is because not everybody thinks the same. So it's having that flexibility and being able to understand how to inspire the people below you.
No, I agree. You brought up a good point, because I think when you're talking about management, good management, whenever there is some criticism, it's always criticism with the end goal of there being some sort of growth and moving forward. I've had managers who will tear you down just to tear you down. And it's like, but there's no, it's, you did this and this is all the things you did wrong, but there's never that, well, but this is how you should do it right, and this is how you do it better next time. There's never that push towards being that growth. And I think that's something we always have to think when you're looking at good management. It's always that push towards being a better, better employee, better process, better product, whatever it is. I think bad management is a lack of trust. And I think we've seen a lot with people who you consider micromanagers. There's just that lack of trust of they're going to either micromanage you, or they're just not going to let you do it because they don't trust that you can. They may go, hey, do this. You know, when I worked at the bagel shop, I was like, hey, make this sandwich. I was like, you're not going to be able to do it. Let me just do it anyway. Like, and there's no trust there because you haven't allowed them to fail. And I think good management allows people to fail within a confine where you can then train them up to be better. I think the sink or swim mentality of like, go out there, sink or swim, and all right, you sunk, so now you're out, is never going to produce. That's bad management, because you're never going to produce anything out of that. You're just burning through people, right? And you're just wasting time. And instead of saying, hey, you didn't succeed at this. When I worked at a restaurant, you know, we would say, hey, you know, oh, you're super outgoing, go work the register. And they were like, I just don't. And they would get overwhelmed. I was like, all right, cool. I could just say, hey, you're not a fit, but it's like, hey, you're just not a fit there. Let me then move you and go, hey, this is what I need, and move you somewhere else and find the right areas. Even like working in the kitchen, some people were really good on the fryer, some people were really good on the grill, and it's like, hey, yes, it's all kitchen work, but there's different avenues where it's like, hey, this is where 100%. You can handle the pressure. Some people were really good about the setup, some people were really good about the finish. So it's like fitting them in those places, and again, using them to an area where they can succeed because there's a step forward. It's like, okay, now you're better at this. Okay, now maybe we can. Hey, it's a slower time. You're not real great at this. Let me move you over to this position that you're not comfortable with and let you try it out in a low stakes environment. So if you do fail, we can then come back and talk about it and train you up and coach you up and move you towards something. Because I think bad management to me is always just do, and and if you don't do it and if you fail, there's just no movement towards anything solid. And it just becomes this dead end street where it's like, well, they failed at this, move on. Which is never good.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So we're telling there's a difference between leadership and management. In your experience, what happens when you get leaders in management roles? What do you think happens when you have someone who has a clear leadership gift, but doesn't maybe have the management gift, but is in a manager role? Or vice versa, you find a manager in a leadership role. What do you think happens in those situations?
I mean, like kind of what we said with the leaders. You know, they've got the vision, they've got the ideas, the kind of to the foresight to put all that together. But if they're just in a management position where they just need to manage that, it's not everything's getting done. You know, you may not always get the organization, the processes, the roles, the routines that need to be built and put in place that you get with somebody who is managing, that is, you know, in that management role. So it's chaos. I guess it can spin into chaos. You get people, whether they're confused just because they don't know what their role contains, what are their, you know, the process isn't figured out. So I think it unravels quickly, but it can be done and it can be held together, but you can see the cracks when they're there.
Yeah, I agree. When you have a manager in a leader role, in a leadership role, I think you're right. I think that it'll hold together for a while, but eventually it'll crack, right? It's like putting a boat together with duct tape. Like, yeah, it'll hold together a while, but eventually it's just going to fall apart. And when it does, it's a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. And what I find when you put managers in leadership roles, you said the right word, it's chaos. And there's just this, it's so like everything's last minute. Everything is just kind of like, well, I thought we were, and I don't know, and but what, and why, and how, and there's all these like questions, and that breeds in the staff. That breeds this sense of like dismay, the sense of oh well, the sense of like disengagement. Just brings a sense of like, they don't have their stuff together, so I'll figure like. There's no forethought. It just becomes everything's last minute. Everything becomes like last minute. It's like, okay, we gotta get this done tomorrow. It's like, well, okay, why? Well, because it's due tomorrow. Why didn't we know? Well, I knew this last week, but I forgot to tell you. And it just becomes this chaos. And there's a lot of frantic energy that happens when you have a manager and a leader in a leadership role.
Yeah, it leads you to like wasted time, resources. You've got burnout, high stress situations. Yep. Absolutely, yeah. It just bottlenecks everything for you, and then it's chaos.
Yeah, and conversely, when you have someone who is skilled at leadership in a management role, I think that does lead to burnout and this lack of creativity, because you have someone who wants to be part of casting vision, be part of this bigger picture, be more forward thinking, and they're just bogged down in the day-to-day nonsense that they just become at some point. They're just like, and because I think if they're not gifted at both, they're just gifted in leadership, because everything is so short term, whatever that short term is, and they're more used to thinking long term, you're going to get this burnout. You're just going to get someone that lacks creative, and you're going to stunt their growth because you're not using their giftings they have. And that's where I see a lot of this burnout in whether it's the fantasy football space, whether it's work, whether it's businesses. We get people who are burnt out because they are leaders who want to really affect the long-term vision of the company. They want to affect the long-term goals and really make a plan to get there, and they're just stuck doing the day-to-day, and they're just like, and after a while, like, you can do it, and they just go, and it just becomes this like really just, and they just go like, and you ask them for an idea, they're like, I don't know. You're like, you used to have great ideas. I'm like, yeah, I don't have any anymore, because creativity is a muscle you have to like exercise on a regular basis. And if you stymie that, you're just like, I don't know. Red, I don't know.
100% why I am switching out of my job at management. I'm tired of managing people 24/7. For the longest time, I've managed people from the age of 17 to 22.
Yep.
And talk about people who are uninspired and don't give a crap about what they're doing. So yeah, it's like you said, it takes a draining resource because I feel like management skills are learned for me. Some of them do come natural for me, but a lot of I think that it comes out of my great management right now as me as a person is learned. These are all learned skills that I've had to slowly come, versus that leadership. It comes a lot more natural to me versus, in those situations. I'm
in the same boat. Like, leadership is a natural quality I think I have, and I've learned management over the years, and I'm still working on my Midwest nice management. It's been 13, 14 years now, but whatever. I'll get there eventually. And part of that is like, part of that's just like I don't say person, it's my Enneagram, which if you don't know Enneagrams, I'm an 8.
I'm an 8. That's funny.
So we're both 8, yes.
The challenger.
If you don't know what Enneagrams are, maybe we'll do this episode on that later. But 8s are very, so we're the challengers. So I'm an 8 with a 7 wing. What's your wing? Do you have a wing?
Shoot, I don't remember what it is.
My guess is you're probably a 9 wing.
I think so, yeah. Actually, now that you say that. And
so I'm an 8 with a 7 wing. So part of that is I'm very black and white, right? So I'm very much like, this is what it is. It's either this or that. And I'm trying to live in the area of gray now, where it's like, it can be okay. We're going to have to talk about Enneagrams offline, Brian, because I think that's super interesting. And I talk to friends who are Instagram, or Enneagrams, and a lot of them are 3s and 6s. And they're
9s.
Yeah. 9s are, I don't say 9s are the worst, but 9s are rough.
The worst.
But part of my Enneagram is like, that's who I am. It's like, I'm going to be very direct, and I'm going to be very black and white. So it's like, either you got it done or you didn't get it done. There is no, you got it partially done, or either you had a good idea or you had a bad idea. There is no in between. And I'm trying to live in that in between. I'm trying to learn that, but that's part of management, right? Is learning those things. And management is a lot more things you can learn. You can take classes, you can read books. There's books and classes on leadership, but I find a lot of them really lean more towards the management than leadership. I do really think leadership is where a lot of companies, that's why they don't grow. And I tweeted this I don't. What do you call an Instagram or a LinkedIn post?
I still need to download it. I've never.
It's not a tweet, but I put it out on LinkedIn. That, like, the difference between leadership and management is why a lot of companies are stuck and stymied and don't grow and don't see the success they want. And they'll have short-term success because managers will give you short-term success, but leadership will give you long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we see a lot of companies in all spaces, whether that's tech, whether that's sports, whether that's whatever, they have this short-term management. They hold it together with duct tape, and they hold it together by doing. And then at some point, one person gets burnt out, and then there's no leadership. It just kind of crumbles, because then you'll see like it's like dominoes. One person falls, it's like wow, and then it just becomes all of a sudden the company's dissolved because one person quit, and then everybody else is like, I don't have the capacity to do it anymore. Couple last questions, Brian. You said you've learned management. What's some advice you could give to someone who is in management right now? What is the one piece of advice you wish you had got early on in your management career?
Honestly, I think it's the empathy piece for me, and I think this is going to be specific to different management styles.
Yep.
Again, we've kind of touched on we're a lot more blunt, straightforward.
Yep.
I think I could have had significantly, like a significant amount of more success earlier on in my career, even just management across the board, whether that be in like schools, activities, stuff like that, any role that I've ever been in, had I led with a little bit more empathy, if I would have been able to connect with people more, just because like you said, you run through people so much faster and you lose great people. You lose some great, then sometimes they just need that, that leadership, that being able that guidance to kind of set them up, because not everybody's seen it. Not everybody has been exposed to certain things. Everybody's got a different background, their knowledge of situations, their work ethic, or just example of work ethic. I've literally in jobs had to teach a kid how to sweep a broom because he didn't know how to work a broom. So like there's varying levels. So being able to have empathy, to being able to take that extra time to just to listen, to learn a little bit, and then you can have a better idea of how you approach things. And I would have saved me so many headaches had I been just a little bit more empathetic in some of my approaches.
Yeah, for me, it's plan and then plan again and then plan again, right? Like you can never over plan.
I would argue with that, but that's just, I'm a classic overthinker though too.
I think you can. I think there's a way of like planning for the worst, right? And plan for the best, and have a plan for the middle, right? So this is the plan. This is how we're going to affect it. But like, I think a lot of people go, well, they have this broad sense of a plan. I think you really need to get granular with the plan, right? So you may plan the first time and go, I worked in custodial. We want to clean 20 rooms in 2 hours. That's the plan. Cool. What's the next plan? The next plan for me was who's going to be there and how are we going to do it? Like, how long does each room take? Right. So it's like, okay, each room, if we're going to do it, each room's got to take, X amount of 10 minutes or whatever it is. Okay. Then the next plan was who can do that, and who's like, how many people do I need to do that plan? Right. So it's that plan. So it's like, here's the overview plan. Here's the breakdown of the plan. And then here's like the actual like step-by-step plan. So it's like, hey, we want to clean 20 rooms in an hour. So that's 60 minutes. We got 20 rooms, right? That's right. 3 minutes a room, right? How many people do I need in each room? So it's like, okay, if I need that, okay, that's not enough. And each task takes 2 minutes. It's like, okay, well, I need 5 people in the room to get it done. And that's where like those constant planning for me is something I wish I would have learned earlier, because I think a lot of times I just winged it. It was just like, I don't know, we'll make it up as we go. And it's like, you do this now. And it's like, I spent a lot more time early on in my management career just kind of like juggling the balls. Like, you go here and now you're here, and it's like, oh, someone like, I'm back. It's like, oh, cool. Now I guess go do this. And you had them wasting time doing like busy work because you just didn't have a plan. So that's why I say, what's something you wish someone had taught you about leadership beforehand?
Oh man, I guess it's the hardest part is like, because I feel like leadership has always been thrust upon me in all early situations. I felt like it was a lot of learn as I go situations, and getting little snippets from different people here and there, and getting a point of view from people like, maybe you're not a great leader, but like I didn't know that at the time, early on as a kid, an adolescent, a teen, all that kind of stuff, getting advice from certain people. Well, you're still learning what true leadership is. So, just really focusing in on, I guess, what those things are that like what you're hearing, what they're trying to help, and like, is it good or is it bad? Because I think you can always take an advice, but it's what you do with that advice and how you break that down and how you really look at it.
No, that's really good. I think there's a huge part of like learning from everyone else and taking that advice and implementation. For me, I wish someone early on would have told me that leadership does not mean I have to do it all, and I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. So I wish someone had said to me, recognize strengths and weaknesses in yourself, but also in others. So there's been times where I've been, in a leadership role and, kind of playing things like, oh man, you should just, I was like, I'll just do it. It's like, no, there's someone else who's much more capable of doing that. And you can put them in that management role and separating the two and go, hey, you take care of this. That is part of leadership, is going, hey, I'm not the best qualified person for this. You are. Let's run with this. Let's talk about this and bring them into the space and not just have to do it all yourself, because you can bring someone in who can say, if I want to lead someone in AI, I'm not an AI expert. I'll bring in someone who is. A lot of times in job interviews now, people ask me, what's your greatest strength? And I go, I don't know everything. And they go, what? And I go, my greatest strength is I don't know everything, but I know where to find the information. Right? Because you may go, hey, can you do this? And I go, nope, but I'll figure out who does, and I'll either have them do it or I'll have them teach me. Right? That's a strength that I think people in leadership lack, and I wish someone would have told me earlier. Is like, you don't have to do everything. Recognize the strengths that are around you and incorporate them into the team. What level you incorporate them is obviously another discussion, but I think you can bring them in for certain things. I work at the University of Wisconsin, and we've been talking about, like, how do we incorporate staff into, bigger decisions. It's like, well, maybe they're there for some of it, but not all of it, and they need to have a voice in the room, and that really does help people get that buy-in. So just incorporate everybody, not doing it yourself. I wish someone would have told me that earlier, because in your leadership style, you can't do it all. You just can't.
Nope, absolutely.
You just can't, and you need to have a few outside voices, because your ideas always sound great to you. I was talking to someone just about writing, and I was like, I need someone to edit my writing. Like, I write really well, but like, I can't read my own writing because I know what I was trying to say, and my brain just goes, this is what you said here. It's like, no, you actually didn't type that at all. You typed the totally wrong word. It's like, but my brain just put it there. And so you need those outside voices. You need people around you who can speak truth, who can speak differently, who think differently. Right? We just talked about Enneagrams. Different Enneagram numbers are always good to have, right? So you know how to get different viewpoints, because leadership is great. And yes, there may only be one leader, but doesn't mean that they have to have all the information. They can take advising from other people, which is huge.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, this has been really good, Brian. I appreciate you coming on and talking about leadership and management and the difference between the two, and what kind of some good and bad aspects of them are. Before we go, tell everybody what you got going on, what you got, if they can find you anywhere, what kind of stuff you got going on, podcast you've got.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. This was a nice little refresh. It's usually just fantasy football and movies for me, so it was nice being able to get on here and really talk about something. I loved it, so I appreciate you having me on. If you're looking for more of me, it's at @too_much_Brian on Twitter, at @too_much_Brian everywhere else. Fantasy Football Advice Network. I've got a show, Too Much Fantasy Football, Too Much Movie Night, if you're looking for a little movie podcast there. But it's usually it. It's just a little me and too much of it.
While we're on the subject of movies, what's the best movie you've seen recently?
Oh, Speak No Evil. I just watched recently on Peacock. It's a James McAvoy movie. I wouldn't quite call it a horror movie. It's more in that thriller aspect of it, but I was pleasantly surprised watching it.
That's the one where he's in the middle of the country and this family comes out.
Yep.
He puts him in he's cut out the kid's tongue, I think.
Yep. Yeah. Freaking wild. Yeah, big James McAvoy fan too.
It's not a movie, but I just watched the 4 seasons on Netflix. The Tina Fey, Steve Carell. It's 8 episodes.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
It's based on an Alan Alda movie, but I watched that this weekend, and that was really well done.
Love me some Tina Fey. We're actually doing Mean Girls on the movie podcast this week. We're recording
very nice.
So, yeah.
Well, everyone, thanks for checking this out. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll get them after the fact if we don't get them live, but we're here to always talk topics. I'm not sure what next week's going to be. On the 20th, we're going to be talking coaching and mentoring. If there's a topic you want me to talk about with someone on here, drop it in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter. I may not be an expert, but I'll find someone who is maybe an expert or can talk on those topics. Whatever that topic might be. I don't have all the information, but I know I can find someone to do it. I've got a lot of big asks out there right now for people. So love you guys turning in. Hit that like and subscribe. Thank you, Brian, for coming on, and we'll see you guys next time.
Later.
Thanks for tuning in to Bridge the Gap.